Alright, now since this is metal stamping and it can get a little loud, I'm only going to do just a little bit of this, but I did want to show you a little bit about working with the design stamps. And the reason why the design stamps are really perfect for beginners, first of all, you don't have to invest in an alphabet set if you don't know for sure that you want to get started with metal stamping. You can just pick a few design stamps that you really like. What I'm using today is a dragonfly and two different shapes or two different sizes of flowers. So we're going for a little nature theme here. And when you use your design stamps, I've secured my blank onto my bench block in two places here. It doesn't have to be exactly here. It's wherever you're working. You're going to want to stamp the whole thing. But I've already done this half, and I've done part of this half. So, but when you use your design stamps, you want to make sure that they're nice and flat against the blank. And the aluminum blanks are nice and soft, so you'll get a good impression with them. But just make sure that you're holding them exactly still, and you want to give them a good tap with your hammer. And that'll give you a nice clean impression. Now, when you're doing an all-over pattern like this too, you want to make sure that you're turning your stamp as well. You don't want to just have everything going in the same direction. I wanted my dragonflies to kind of be the primary here, so I filled in with that first, and then I went through and added some flowers. I added my larger flowers next, and then now I'm just going to fill in with some smaller flowers. And the smaller stamps, you don't have to have quite as hard of a tap because you're not displacing as much metal. One thing you do want to do when you're working on these all over patterns like this is make sure that you're filling in all the way to the edges. And sometimes even off the edge a little will help it to look more filled in, more like it's an overall pattern. You don't just want to focus in the center. Now that's not true for the alphabet stamps, of course. You want to make sure that those are nice and centered so that your message is prominent. But now I've stamped this. Excuse me. I think I want a couple more over here. Just look it over, see if you've got any empty spots. And having a smaller design stamp will certainly help you to fill those in. I'm using a 6mm and a 3mm stamp. This tiny flower is 3mm. Alright. So at this point, I have removed the plastic from these blanks. They are here to help keep it from scratching when you're going to bend it. But I wanted to stamp and I wanted to be able to darken my impressions. And there's a lot of ways to do this. You can use acrylic paint or a paint marker. I don't have one of those. I usually just use a Sharpie. Sharpies are a little bit more of a hassle for these larger pieces. So typically I'd recommend acrylic paint, but just for the sake of convenience here, I'm going for a short project today. So I'm going to use what I have most handy. And I'm going to crank this bracelet out in about 10 minutes. But what I've done is I've darkened in these impressions with my marker. And I'm using a polishing pad to remove the excess ink. It's just going to stay in these impressions here. And it would work just the same way if you're using acrylic. Some people are really fond of liver of sulfur. Now that's not actually going to work on aluminum blanks. I just want to point that out. Because aluminum will not oxidize the same way that silver will, or copper. So, you just want to go little by little, and don't let the marker dry too much. You just want to go little by little here and fill that in. Alright, now that I've got this all darkened and polished up, and you know, the black fingers to prove it, I'm going to show you how the bracelet bender works. Now I mentioned I had removed the protective plastic from the front side so that I could stamp it, but I haven't removed it from the back side, and this is to keep any scratches that really aren't necessary at all from happening. So to use the bracelet bender, you just put the edge in here in a little groove, and you just use your hands to bend it until you form half a cuff here. I'm just going to push it right along there, just like that, and then do the same on the other side. Now these are nice heavy-duty gauge aluminum. They're 14 gauge, so that makes them actually a little bit tough to manipulate by hand compared to some of the thinner gauges. But if you don't get quite what you're looking for the first time, just put it back on there and form it again. Now at this point you've got a cuff that you can manipulate with your hands. You can make it a little bit bigger or smaller as you need. And at this point too, you can take that plastic coating off the back side. I think I'm going to work a little bit more on mine just to get it a little bit rounded, more rounded here in the front. But I love these bracelet bending bars. This is a new product from ImpressArt, and the blanks are also a new gauge. What's also nice about them is they're rounded on the edges. I don't know if you've ever looked on Etsy or anything like that and seen some of the other aluminum blanks out there, and most of the time they're square on the edges. You have to file them down so that you don't scratch yourself when you go to put them on. But then you've got just this nice little nature theme cuff.